Hi, and welcome back to Divorce Talk and More with me, Gabrielle Hartley, online mediator and author of Better Apart, The Radically Positive Way to Separate. Um, as you know, we always talk about things that are positive and divorce oriented. Sometimes we go a little bit off divorce, but today I am very excited because we have Sara Olsher here, who is a author, illustrator, a divorced mom, and the founder of an incredible company called Mighty and Bright, where she writes books and visual calendars to help kids through navigate through and forward through their divorce process. And so I'm so happy to have you with us here today, and I'm dying for you to share your story with my viewers.
Thanks so much, Gabrielle. I'm really excited for this opportunity. So I basically got a divorce when my daughter was 18 months old, and I didn't really realize how much she was struggling with not knowing what was going to happen next. She was showing a lot of anxiety, and I was really stressed. I think a lot of us going through divorce are in survival mode, just trying to make all the pieces fit again, and it's really, really hard. And I was like, what is happening? Like, she wouldn't sleep. She was scared of all these different things, and she was really young, and so I didn't really know what to do. So I reached out to a child therapist who, she and my daughter and I went together, and this woman was fantastic. She gave me a lot of great tools for how to talk to my daughter, how to validate her feelings. But the thing that really struck me was she made this like construction paper calendar to show how what days we were going to be seeing the therapist, and then also I could add on there when she would be seeing her dad next. And so I had a background in illustration. I was a wedding illustrator for 6 years, and I had already done drawings of our family. So I just made these little magnets and stuck them on this like pan that you stick under a refrigerator to catch the drips. And it was like really janky, but I could not believe what a difference it made for her.
And,
And we used the calendar for like 6 years to show her when she'd be with me and when she'd be with her dad.
and does her dad use one also?
He actually did not. And what's interesting is I think after I decided to turn this into a business, I have a background in psychology, but I wanted to make sure that I was focusing on children specifically because I did not study kids. I had no idea how cool they were until I had my own. So I talked to a children's therapist about that. I was like, what happens if my ex is not like on board with anything I want to be on board with?
Mhm.
As I'm sure is common for a lot of people. I was focused on staying positive. He was pretty angry. And she said, as long as one parent is using it, don't try and force it on the other one if they're not open to it, because the kids attach to the calendar like they attach to a positive stuffed animal, and it kind of loses its power if you have one at the other house and the parent's not using it.
That's so.
So
And so, are you saying that even if you're in, if anyone's watching this who's in a really hard divorce, they can still use this calendar when the kid is with them, and it
yes,
can be game changing?
that's what we did. My divorce was really high conflict. And this was like night and day for my daughter. Night and day.
That's so interesting. And so, how did you introduce it to your daughter? Like, how, like, was she always confused about where she was going, and then it was cleared up? Like, how did this help?
She actually didn't show any, like, she didn't ask any questions because she was really little. And I think that that is one of the misconceptions that parents have about their kids, is that their kids are going to ask questions. And that's how the parent will know how to answer the question. But the truth is, it's more about like organizing what's inside their brains, because they don't, like, it's like chaos in there, like it would be for us if we didn't know where we were going to be next. Like if I lost my calendar on my phone, like I wouldn't even know where to begin. Like
And
you and I would not be talking.
what I especially like about this is that it's not app based. So many things today are online, which is great. And I live and die by my phone. But it's also really nice to have, paper backups, as
Yeah.
I have my paper backup. and I think that for kids, especially kids who don't have a phone yet, who are not, you know, up to the tech part of their lives, if they're little, I think it can be really helpful to have something that's bright and cheerful that they can sort
It
of look
actually
at
it's
really.
necessary. It's actually necessary. When you look at the way that kids learn, they actually need something tangible in their hands, something they can hold, something they can see. And this takes really complex things and makes it tangible. And that is what makes it so powerful. It's incredibly simple, but when you think about like the way that humans organize during stress, like we make lists, we try and organize ourselves, and kids don't have that skill yet. So basically what we're doing is they're not going to be saying, I mean, some kids probably would be asking when they're going to see each parent, but mostly they're just going to be having behavioral issues because they're so confused and they don't know, they're just anxious and they don't know how to solve that problem. And so by taking it and turning it into a tangible calendar, something that they own that doesn't have the whole family's thing on it, and gives them a sense of ownership, you're really solving problems you may not have even realized that they had.
So are you suggesting that the calendar might actually stop meltdowns?
Yeah, it did
That,
for us.
that's amazing, because
Yeah,
your kid is no longer living sort of in the swirl of where am I going, who am I going to be with, what am I going to do,
yeah.
especially if they're maybe too young. You
Mhm.
don't happen to have a calendar with you that you can show people, do you? You
I
don't have.
do. I have one in my drawer here. So this is just what my calendar
Right.
looks like, and it's fully magnetic. These are the little buttons that go on there. If you can see, this is one of the mom buttons. I have buttons for basically everything that you could possibly imagine, martial arts after school, etc. Basically so that your kid can visually see what to
And
expect.
I'm going to ask you a question, which I don't know what your answer is going to be, but do you have two different colors for moms and two different colors
Yeah.
for dads?
I do, yeah. One of my big things is making sure that everyone feels seen. So this is my book for divorce. And as you can see, this has a mom and a dad, and the little girl's biracial. I also have versions of this on Amazon, what happens when moms get divorced and what happens when dads get divorced. I wanted to make sure that even if the population isn't super big, that those families felt that they were seen, because I don't want any child to look at a book and say, but I have two dads or I have two moms.
Yeah, so I think it's so validating, in such a small way that can really ripple throughout their lives to feel seen. I can
Agreed.
remember being a kid when my parents divorced and I was already 9. I used to kind of look in bookstores for books about kids whose parents were divorced. But of course, back then, the people who were writing were born in like the 50s,
Yeah.
and so like they weren't writing those books, right? It's like our generation who's writing the books, and it's just so wonderful that there's
It is.
so much more out there. Do you have any like other tips or things that you think it's really important for people to remember when they're navigating with a difficult spouse or with a kid who's disorganized? Like, do you have the kid keep the calendar in their room? Do you have it in a common space? Like you mentioned to begin with that the kid really owns the calendar. So where does it live?
Yeah, we kept ours in the kitchen. And my calendars can be mounted on a wall or on a fridge, like they're magnetic. And then they have these like magnets that stick on the wall, so you can stick it anywhere. But yeah, I like to have it in a common space. Now that we've transitioned out of the like divorce world and into the kind of blended family world, it's in our living room, like near the door. So it really depends on the family,
That's
and
interesting.
where you're going to see.
Do you have, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you have, um, are there options when there's blended, like other kids involved also?
Yeah, what I really recommend is each kid has their own calendar, because like I was saying earlier, like it's really important they have a sense of ownership over it. And so yeah, we have one that's like, when is one kid going to be here? When is one kid not going to be here?
And what's so interesting listening to you is that it seems like even people whose kids are, even families who aren't divorced, could really benefit from this calendar
Yes.
system in a pictographic way. Because sometimes I know in my house with my kids, not all of my kids love running around and doing the myriad of activities they were doing during the non-COVID world that we used to live in, which hopefully we're
Mhm.
going to kind of go back to. On the sooner side. So if you have kids who seem like they're doing just fine and they're not talking about it, do you still think this calendar is a good idea?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things I think you were mentioning earlier about older generations not writing books about this. I think this is one of the positive things that our generation and the younger generations are really doing well, which is we're talking about it. And it's really children, people talk about how kids are resilient, but they're actually not that resilient. Um, they are really easily damaged. And one of the things that is really helpful is having a loving parent who is open to talking about things and making sure that kids are feel safe to talk to them. And that's what the calendar is about. It's a constant reminder that you are there and open and willing to talk. And what I really recommend when kids are not acting like anything is wrong is just bringing it up and just saying, "Are you doing okay? I just want to remind you, like, I'm here to talk about it. If you're worried about anything, like, I'm not going to get mad at you,
And
because
especially little kids, they can be really open, right?
little kids can be really open, but the older kids get, the more they try to protect their parents. And so it becomes really important that you say to them and you hold yourself accountable, like, I am not going to get mad at you. It is okay if you love your other parent. When a step parent comes into the mix, speaking from experience, that was a really hard transition for me to be
Hmm.
like, okay, my kid has another mom. Like, I don't feel good about this. I had to really watch my facial expressions, and let my daughter know the more people in your life, the more people love you. And that can only be a positive thing. And I want you to know that you can talk to me about it. And the
That's amazing
calendar,
that you
it
gave her permission. Like I think giving your kids permission is such a
precisely.
big deal.
Yes. Yeah, because the thing about kids that I learned, when I started studying them is like how smart they are and how if something isn't spoken and they just think it's not safe to talk about.
Yeah.
And so you have to be the one to initiate that conversation, even if it's going to be hard for you, because you don't want them inventing stories in their own head. Because if you don't tell them what's going on, they're going to invent something 90 times worse in their own head, and then they're going to stew with it,
So
you know?
if you had one thing that you could tell your daughter if she were to get divorced, God forbid, in the future, like what's one piece of advice that you learned from your divorce that you would want to tell somebody? I say your daughter because that's the
Yeah.
person you love the most, right?
Yeah. Um, Always put your kids first. Always. And what that means, I think we say that a lot. But what does that actually mean? I recently came across a statistic that said parents talk to their kids on average 10 minutes about the divorce. 10 minutes.
Wow.
This has to be not only a one-time conversation. It's fine if the first conversation is 10 minutes, that's fine. But it needs to be an ongoing conversation. By putting your kids first, you're saying, like, I am going to sit in my own discomfort of having this awful conversation and my worry that they're going to say something that's going to make me feel
Yeah.
terrible, and have some empathy for the fact that, like, my kids are really struggling. This is the biggest change in their lives, and they really need somebody, a grown up, who's going to take responsibility and take on the hard stuff so that they don't have to carry it.
That's a great point. You know what's so interesting, Sarah, is working in the divorce course for so many years, there's really strong messaging that gets set out, which is, this is not your kid's problem. Don't talk about the divorce to your kids. The judges say it, the lawyers say it, the therapists say it. And yet, just because maybe you're not supposed to talk about it one-to-one in a, it's not that you can't talk about it at all. I think it's the fear of how you're going to talk about it. So
Yeah,
I just
100%.
always recommend bringing in a therapist, bringing
Mhm.
in a neutral mediator, even somebody who's there for the children, for the child, to let them know that they are going to be okay. It's what's I think is so interesting to me personally is, even though my family definitely talked about the issues around our divorce. See, I call
Mhm.
it our divorce, even though I haven't been divorced, right? When we
Yeah,
got divorced,
yeah.
my brother and I, who changed houses together every day for 10 years, we never talked about our parents' divorce until we were in our like later 20s. It just never even came up.
Wow, that's
It's so
fascinating.
interesting. So it's so nice to have you here. Can you please tell the listeners where they can find you, how they can access your resources, and learn more about all of your offerings, Sarah?
Absolutely. So this is my book. It's called What Happens When Parents Get Divorced. And you can find me at mightyandbright.com. And I actually really recommend checking it out because I have free resources for how to have that conversation with your kids. I have some really cute printable like affirmations basically that you can hang up in your house so that your kids are reminded, like, no matter what happens, a parent's love for their kids never goes away. All these things that you really want your kids to know in the middle of a divorce, you can find it at mightyandbright.com.
I love this. I feel like we could all use it, whether you're divorced, if you're listening to this and one of your kids is divorced or your sisters are divorced, these free resources also sound so wonderful. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me, Sarah. And if you enjoyed this video and you would like to hear more about divorce talk and more, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. If there's any particular topics or people that you would like to hear from, or topics you'd like to hear me talk about, please send a message directly to me at Gabrielle@GabrielleHartley.com.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.